everyone. I want to start actually with a question. How many of you work for startups or are entrepreneurs? Pretty good mix. And how many of you work for larger institutions or corporations? Great. We've got the right audience, because I think this idea of startups and corporations sitting together is really what I want to talk to you about. The title of my talk is Collective Disruption, and it's really this notion, and boy, what pressure to have Clayton Christensen in the room when I've got a talk that's titled Disruption. So with all due respect, sir, it really is about kind of redefining that word to not be a bad thing, and that disruption can be a good thing if we can find new ways to collaborate. So I'm going to jump into this and start by basically building on John's point of trying to scare the hell out of you just a little bit more by saying that we are in this era of disruption. 61 is the number of years that companies used to stay in the S&P 500 back in 1958. That was the average tenure of companies. As of 2012, it's 18. So if you take that rate of change, that means by the year 2027, 75% of the companies on today's S&P will be off that list. And to bring that a little bit more to life, we all know the Kodak story and those stories of disruption, but I do a lot of work with Cisco. Cisco is a very large technology company. If you look back 10 years ago, all of their competitors are either gone or non-issues for them. Their set of competitors has completely evolved from 10 years ago to who they are today. So my message is you can survive. You've just got to work in a different way to get there. And it really is about getting away from this tension of startups being all about disrupting large companies and large companies being afraid of being disrupted and actually finding ways to work together to co-create new businesses, entire new industries, and really change the world. So I want to start by talking about how do we embrace disruption and actually give you a few examples of the way some companies are already doing that today, embracing this kind of collaboration and co-creating new businesses, new industries that include both startups and corporates. And really it is about kind of talking about this collective disruption is not about destroying anything necessarily, it's about transforming. It's about creating something new out of change. So a lot of this depends on corporates and startups adopting more iterative approaches. It really is corporates learning to work more entrepreneurially and work at the cadence of startups, and startups learning to work with corporates as well. We actually have a framework of how companies and startups can co-create and drive that collaboration all the way through the process. How many of you have heard the term open innovation? Most of you. It's actually a great movement that 10 or 12 years ago, it really wasn't that common that large companies were looking outside for ideas. It really has become the norm. A whole ecosystem has evolved to put that kind of access to innovators at the desktop. What I'm seeing and what I'm saying to you is what's coming next is getting beyond that and actually co-creating new businesses with these startups. And what it's going to take is collaborating from beginning to end and doing it in a very iterative approach. I want to focus in the few minutes I have and just give you a couple of snapshots of what some companies are doing today to demonstrate how you can bring this to life. So I don't know, is Bob Lutz still here? I'm a consultant and an MBA, so I'm in bad shape already. But as a consultant, I created some labels for this. But really it was 2 years of looking at the way companies are doing this well and saying what are the frameworks that they're using and how can we help codify that to help other companies emulate it. And the first is what I call inside in. And that's the idea of large companies not creating skunkworks. It's a different kind of a model, but creating kind of an island with a bridge to the mainland, separating those teams to allow them to be more entrepreneurial. But in addition to that, and this is a key point, to co-create with startups, not just to create their own skunkworks and pretend we're startups, but to actually do it together. Johnson & Johnson, I think, is a wonderful example of this. A very large company, but a very great innovator, and really co-creating businesses with startups. An example of that, they have 4 innovation centers around the world in, I think, Shanghai, London, Boston, and Silicon Valley. These innovation centers are actually co-locating startup entrepreneurs and their corporate business and technology folks to mentor these startups. they'll find interesting people who can begin a disruptive opportunity for them, with them, of an area of interest, actually fund them to come in and move into their offices. They won't take any equity. They'll do it because they believe it's the right thing to do, and in the end it will pay off. And they're actually helping these entrepreneurs and startups envision and prove out very, very disruptive and transformative technologies. So it's just one example of how a large company is doing this. And I call that kind of doing it inside in. There are advantages and disadvantages. You're still part of the corporate ecosystem. Now, another approach is what I would call inside out. Here you are pushing this a little farther outside, a little bit more autonomy, a little bit less integration, advantages and disadvantages to that, but an easier way to create a more entrepreneurial reward system and a little bit more freedom for these teams. An example of that, Lowe's. We don't often think of Lowe's as a great innovator, right? You know, we think of them as home improvement screwdrivers and lumber. But they are really trying to push their envelope and find new ways to innovate with partners. So they've partnered with Singularity University. They've set out separate incubators outside of the company and are co-creating new businesses with visionary entrepreneurs. Everything from a hologram, basically a virtual reality pad that you can walk around this room and see everything as it would be decorated with all the materials and furnishings that you've selected to give people that experience, that augmented reality of what their purchases would look like. Another one that I'm not so crazy about is the thing called Oshbot, which is a robotic assistant in the aisle to help answer your questions for you. We'll see where that one plays out. But it demonstrates the idea of really trying to push the envelope of where they might go with their innovation and doing it by partnering with people completely outside of their industry and outside of their four walls. Another approach, and I don't promote one or the other, I'm really just trying to shine a light on the fact that there are multiple ways to do this, and they're situational, and you may want to apply multiple versions of this depending on your business and on your organization, but I would call it outside in. The idea of taking that entrepreneurial mindset and some of those startup experts and bringing them in the four walls. A quick example of that, Jarden, which is actually the company that is, I used to work for Sunbeam. Sunbeam is now Jarden, a large consumer products company that you would know the brands, but probably not the corporate entity. How many of you have crock pots? Most of us. Well, you know, crock pots are something you buy every 20 years and you use frequently, but they wanted to find a way to have more frequent interaction with their consumers. And so they said, we're going to get into the food business. Very different than the appliance business. They knew they didn't know that business. They recruited an entrepreneur by the name of Brian Janesco, who had started several premium direct-to-consumer food businesses and funded them and actually spun them off and exited them. Brought him in as a surrogate kind of entrepreneur on demand to run this venture for them inside of their walls and incubate it using lean startup approaches and entrepreneurial approaches. Lots of stories behind the scenes of all the creative tension you can imagine that happened there. But the great news is it helped them push that idea forward and not die from the corporate antibodies that would typically kill something that was so different than their current business model. So really what I'm trying to highlight here is that there really are some new ways that we can think about corporations and startups working together collaboratively and doing it in a variety of different models. And I just want to leave you with just a couple more examples of where I see this going. I really do believe that this is about changing the way organizations operate and the structures that they have. Cisco, as I mentioned, is a client, and I think the Internet of Things already came up in one, if not more, of the presentations. It is absolutely a big opportunity and one that Cisco has bet big on. What Cisco is doing to address the Internet of Things isn't just traditional product development. They are encompassing and including their entire ecosystem in this effort. As an example, over 3 days, they involved 60,000 employees to come up with ideas for where they should focus on Internet of Things and Internet of Everything opportunities. 500 vetted ideas came out of that. They've then created something called, and Kate O'Keefe leads this, Cisco Hyper Innovation Living Labs, where they are taking these Internet of Thing opportunities and going after whichever vertical they're thinking of, whether it's medical or infrastructure, pulling together a group of peer companies, other large companies that matter in those industries, whether it's GE in infrastructure or Philips in healthcare, building peer groups to study those areas, to collaborate together as large companies. How could we bring these kinds of solutions to market together? And then leveraging the innovation ecosystem in Silicon Valley to bring technologies to bear to build these kind of virtual organizations around making something bigger than one company could. One more example that I think that inspires me. A company called IE Crowd is based in Chicago, and they're really a virtual enterprise of the future. It's a virtual business model. Amro Albana, who founded it, very visionary person, someone I like a lot, saw all these technologies that didn't have a home, saw all these great ideas that weren't being brought to market, both in universities and elsewhere. The first product that they've gone after is something called the Kite Patch. They found a technology in the University of California, I think Riverside, that that patch masks the odor of the human being to the mosquito. So imagine the implications of that. This was languishing in a laboratory at the UC system. So they found that idea, partnered with that university and that professor, and then built a virtual company around that. They've partnered with NGOs in Africa to do the field testing. They've partnered with business professionals and technology firms and startups to help build a business around that. They raised their money on Indiegogo. They asked for $75,000. Within 2 weeks, they raised $500,000. And now they're taking that model and doing it again and again in areas that matter. And so it really just shows you where this is going. And I hope that what you see is the opportunity as entrepreneurs and corporates to do even more together and really be part of changing the world. Now, it's not going to be easy. It takes a lot of commitment, especially on the corporate side. There's a lot of barriers. So it really is about making sure there's senior level leadership and vision to move in these kinds of directions. It's about that balance of autonomy and integration, that island with a bridge to the mainland, so that we're confident that we're not killing these ideas, but providing enough integration that these two very different types of organizations can collaborate. And it's going to mean new skills and mindsets. I truly believe that 5, 10 years from now, that the structure of companies is going to be different. That it's going to be more like the film industry, where you've got creatives, you've got producers, you've got a group of people that come together for projects, do the projects, and move on to the next iteration of that. And that's what I think is the future of organizations in bringing these kinds of innovations to life. So, what I want to leave you with is that I've been in innovation my whole career. I started as a corporate exec for large companies. I've been a VC. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a consultant, always in the innovation space. And what drives me is not just the diversity of the work, but the chance to make a difference. I think all of us who are in innovation, we want to make money, but we want to kind of make a difference. And I truly believe that these kinds of models are about creating more opportunities to make a bigger difference than we could otherwise. I'm going to put a 10-second commercial in here because I'm passionate about this subject, and I wrote a book on it. And we do have a table out back, and Noel, who's with me, will also be out there. I wanted to offer to this group, I've got about 50 books. I'd be happy to give those 50 books away. And also, if you want to provide a business card, I'll give you a 3-day window next week where you can buy the ebook for 99 cents. Because for me, this is really about spreading the word. And all I would ask of you is if you take a book today or you take the ebook, that if you read it, you write a review. I don't care if you say good or bad. I hope you say good, but that's my only request. And I'd love to speak with you more today and tonight, and thanks for your attention, and I guess I'll turn it back to you.